The order was simple: leave no survivors. For 3 days, the most feared alpha in the northern hemisphere tore through the forest, his heart turning to ice. With every passing hour, his twin pups remained missing. He believed they had been kidnapped by a rival pack, taken by enemies who wanted to end his bloodline. When he finally kicked down the door of the isolated cabin, his claws were fully extended, and his beta was ready to execute whoever stood inside. But the Alpha King didn't find soldiers. He didn't find a trap. He found the one thing that could bring a monster to his knees, and it changed the fate of the entire pack forever. The rain in Oakhaven Woods didn't just fall, it punished the earth. It was a torrential, freezing deluge that turned dirt roads into rivers and made visibility impossible. For Violet, a 24-year-old nurse seeking solitude in her grandmother's old A-frame cabin, the storm was supposed to be comforting. It was a barrier between her and the chaotic life she had left behind in the city. She was sitting by the wood stove, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands, when she heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a sound too rhythmic, too desperate to be nature. A scratching, then a whimpering cry. Violet set the mug down, her pulse quickening. Bears were common in Oakhaven, as were cougars, but the cry sounded distinctively human, or at least small and distressed. She grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, her only weapon, and moved toward the heavy oak door. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" The only answer was another cry, sharper this time. A flash of lightning illuminated the porch through the window, and Violet gasped. 2 small lumps were huddled against the woodpile, shivering so violently they looked like vibrating stones. She threw the door open, the wind instantly whipping her hair across her face. Oh my God! She dropped the poker and rushed out into the freezing rain. There were 2 of them, toddlers, a boy and a girl, likely twins, no older than 4. They were dressed in nothing but tattered sleeping shirts, their feet bare and muddied. They weren't just cold, they were blue. Come here, I've got you," Violet shouted over the roar of the thunder. She scooped them up. They were shockingly heavy, dense muscle and bone, far heavier than children their size should be. As she pulled them against her chest, she felt a strange, radiating heat coming from their skin, like they were burning up with a fever. Yet their skin was ice cold to the touch from the rain. She wrestled them inside and kicked the door shut, locking out the storm. "You're safe," she whispered, her nursing instincts taking over. "I'm Violet. I'm going to help you." The boy, whose eyes were a startling, piercing amber, growled. It wasn't a child's pretend growl. It was a guttural, vibrating sound that seemed to come from deep within his chest. He positioned himself in front of his sister, baring small, flat teeth. Violet paused, hands raised. "It's okay, little one. I'm not going to hurt you. Look. Warmth." She pointed to the fire. The girl peeked out from behind her brother. Her eyes were different, heterochromatic. One blue, one gold. She whimpered and tugged on the boy's sodden shirt. "Hot," the boy said, his voice raspy. Violet moved slowly. "Yes, the fire is hot. Let's get these wet clothes off." It took an hour to get them dried, dressed in her oversized t-shirts, and fed. They ate voraciously, tearing into the cold roast chicken she had in the fridge with a savagery that unnerved her. They didn't use forks. They used their fingers, ripping the meat apart and swallowing it almost whole. "Where are your parents?" Violet asked softly as they finished. The boy went stiff. "Bad men," he whispered. "Run. Bad men were chasing you?" Violet's heart broke. Kidnapping? Abuse? She reached for her landline phone to call the sheriff, but the line was dead. The storm had knocked out the connection. Her cell phone had 0 service in the valley. She was trapped, isolated in a storm with 2 terrified children fleeing bad men. "No one is coming in here," Violet promised, a fierce protectiveness surging through her. She dragged her mattress from the loft down to the living room, placing it right in front of the fire. "We stay together. I'll watch the door." The twins watched her with an intensity that felt ancient. Slowly, the girl crawled onto the mattress. She patted the spot next to her. Violet hesitated, then sat down. Immediately, the girl curled into her side. The boy remained vigilant for a moment longer, staring at the door, before exhaustion overtook him. He climbed onto Violet's other side, resting his head heavily on her chest. As they slept, Violet noticed something that made her breath hitch. The scratches on the boy's arms, marks from briars and branches, were already closing up, fading from angry red welts to faint pink lines before her very eyes. She stroked the boy's dark hair, her hand trembling. "What are you?" she whispered into the darkness. 30 miles south, the gates of the Obsidian estate were torn off their hinges, not by intruders, but by the Alpha King himself. Ryder Kovacs was a man composed of violence and discipline. He stood 6'5", with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun and eyes the color of hardened steel. He was the alpha of the Shadow Pine Pack, the largest territory in the state, and he was currently losing his mind. "Report!" Ryder roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier in the grand foyer. Gavin, his beta and second-in-command, stepped forward. Gavin was leaner, with a sharp, angular face and eyes that always seemed to be calculating the odds. "The scent trail ends at the river, Alpha. The storm. It's washing everything away." Ryder grabbed Gavin by the collar of his tactical vest and slammed him against the wall. "My pups are out there in a freezing storm, Gavin. Heirs to the pack, and you're telling me about rain?" "We found traces of wolfsbane near the nursery window," Gavin choked out, his hands held up in submission. "And a dagger with the crest of the Southern Rogues." Ryder released him, his chest heaving. A growl ripped through the room, causing the dozen gathered enforcers to drop their heads in submission. The Southern Rogues, mercenaries. If they had Leo and Mia, they weren't looking for ransom. They were looking to extinguish the Kovacs line. "They took them to break me," Ryder said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "They want a war. I'll give them an apocalypse." He turned to his head enforcer, a scarred warrior named Kale. "Mobilize the entire guard, every tracker, every fighter. I don't care about borders. I don't care about treaties. If a squirrel moves in these woods, I want to know about it. We hunt until we find them, or we find their bodies." As the pack scrambled to obey, turning into a well-oiled machine of death, Gavin lingered in the shadows of the hallway. He adjusted his collar, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. The dagger had been a nice touch, Gavin thought. He had planted it himself. The truth was far simpler and far more dangerous. Gavin hadn't kidnapped the twins. He had simply left the nursery window open and laced their milk with a mild hallucinogen that induced panic. The pups, terrified by shadows Gavin had orchestrated, had run into the woods. Gavin didn't want to kill them himself. The scent would be on him. He wanted nature to do it, or the rogues. Once the twins were gone, Ryder would be broken. A broken alpha was weak, and a weak alpha could be challenged. "Gavin," Ryder barked from the doorway, shrugging into a heavy leather trench coat. "You're with me. We take the North Ridge. If they headed for the border, they have to pass through Oak Haven." "The human settlements?" Gavin asked, feigning concern. "We can't shift near the cabins. The laws." "Damn the laws!" Ryder snarled, his eyes flashing a glowing red. "If humans get in my way tonight, they burn with the rest of them." They moved out into the night, a convoy of black-armored SUVs tearing up the mud. followed by shadows that moved through the trees faster than any vehicle. The Alpha King was on the hunt, and the forest held its breath in terror. Violet woke up to a low, vibrating rumble. It wasn't thunder. It was coming from the boy, Leo. He was sitting bolt upright on her chest, his small body tense as a bowstring, staring at the front door. "What is it?" Violet whispered, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The fire had died down to embers, casting long, dancing shadows across the cabin. "Pack," Leo whispered. The word sent a chill down Violet's spine. "Pack? You mean wolves?" "Angry," the girl, Mia, said. She was clutching Violet's shirt so tightly her knuckles were white. "Daddy is angry." Violet sat up, confusion warring with fear. "Your dad is here? That's good, right? We can tell him you're safe." "No!" Leo shouted, scrambling back. "Smell wrong. Bad man is with him. Bad man smells like poison." Before Violet could decipher what a 4-year-old meant by smelling poison, a howl tore through the night outside. It was close. Terrifyingly close. It wasn't the lonely howl of a coyote. It was a deep, resonant sound that commanded obedience. Then came the lights. High beams cut through the thin curtains of the cabin, flooding the room with blinding white light. Tires crunched on gravel. Doors slammed. Violet scrambled off the mattress, pushing the twins behind the heavy leather armchair. "Stay down. Do not move." She grabbed the iron poker again. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She moved to the window and peeked through a crack in the curtains. Outside, it looked like a paramilitary invasion. 3 massive black SUVs had blocked her driveway. Men were pouring out. Huge men, dressed in dark tactical gear. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding the cabin in seconds. In the center of them stood a man who looked like a god of war. He wore a long, dark coat, his hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. Even from this distance, Violet could feel the power radiating off him. He didn't hold a gun. He didn't need one. He looked at her cabin door like he intended to rip it off its hinges with his bare hands. "Open the door!" A voice boomed from outside. It was the man next to the giant, the one with the sharp, rat-like face. "We know you're in there. Surrender the hostages, and we might let you live." Hostages. Violet's blood ran cold. They thought she had kidnapped them. "I didn't take them!" Violet screamed back, though she knew the storm likely swallowed her voice. "They came to me." "Breach it," the giant ordered. His voice was lower, but it carried effortlessly through the wind. Violet backed away from the door, raising the iron poker. She knew it was useless. She was a nurse, not a soldier. She was 5'4" and weighed 120 pounds, soaking wet. These men looked like they ate iron for breakfast. "Hide!" she hissed at the twins. "No," Leo growled. The boy stood up, his eyes glowing a bright, supernatural yellow. "Mine," Violet gasped. Yellow eyes. The front door didn't just open, it exploded. The wood splintered inward as a boot slammed against the lock. The door flew off its hinges, crashing onto the floorboards. Wind and rain swirled into the warm cabin. 2 men rushed in first, guns drawn. Violet swung the poker wildly. It connected with the arm of the first man with a sickening crunch. "Get back!" she screamed, swinging again. The man didn't even flinch. He just looked at his arm, annoyed, and backhanded her. The force of the blow sent Violet flying across the room. She crashed into the bookshelf, books tumbling down around her. Pain exploded in her temple, and her vision swam. "Secure the target," the sharp-faced man, Gavin, yelled, stepping over the threshold. "She's armed. Put her down." One of the soldiers raised a heavy rifle, aiming it directly at Violet's chest. "No!" The scream didn't come from Violet. It came from the twins. Leo and Mia launched themselves from behind the chair. But they didn't run to the door. They ran to Violet. They threw their small bodies over her, shielding her with their own skin. "Don't touch!" Leo shrieked, his voice distorting into a half growl. The soldier hesitated. "Alpha, the targets are shielding the hostile." Ryder Kovac stepped into the cabin. The room seemed to shrink. He had to duck his head to enter. He walked past Gavin, past the soldiers, his eyes locked on the pile of bodies against the bookshelf. He saw the broken door. He saw the woman, bleeding from her temple, dazed and terrified. And he saw his children, his heirs, the most powerful wolf bloodline in a century, curled protectively over her, snarling at their own father. Ryder froze. The scent hit him then. It wasn't the scent of the southern rogues. It wasn't the scent of wolfsbane. It was the scent of rain, chamomile tea, and something else. Something sweet and earthy, like lavender and honey. It was the scent of an omega. But not just any omega. His wolf, the beast that had been raging for 3 days, suddenly stopped pacing in his mind. It sat down. It whined. "Mate!" the beast whispered. Ryder blinked, the red fading from his eyes, replaced by a stunned steel grey. He looked at Violet, who was struggling to sit up, one arm wrapped protectively around Mia. "Daddy?" Mia whimpered, her aggression fading as she saw his eyes clear. "Don't hurt Violet. She gave us chicken." The silence in the cabin was deafening. The soldiers looked between their alpha and the woman on the floor. Gavin sensed the shift. He saw the recognition in Ryder's eyes, and panic flared in his chest. If Ryder bonded with this human, this stray, and the twins talked, Gavin was dead. "She's bewitched them," Gavin shouted, drawing a handgun. "It's a witch's trick. She's confusing you, Alpha. Stand aside. I'll end it." Gavin leveled the gun at Violet's head. Violet saw the barrel. She didn't look at Gavin. She looked at Ryder. Their eyes met, and in that fraction of a second, an electric current arced between them, invisible but undeniable. "Ryder," she whispered, reading the name on the tactical patch on his chest. Gavin's finger tightened on the trigger. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the small cabin, a thunderclap that rivaled the storm outside. Violet flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for the burn of the bullet. She felt the twins scream against her ribs, their small bodies vibrating with terror. But the pain never came. Instead, there was a sickening crunch of bone and a wet gurgle of agony. Violet opened her eyes. The scene before her defied all logic. Ryder Kovac had moved faster than the human eye could track. He stood between Gavin and Violet, his back to her, a wall of black trench coat and muscle. His hand, currently transformed into a massive clawed appendage, was wrapped around Gavin's wrist. Gavin's gun lay smoking on the floorboards. His arm was bent at an impossible angle. The radius and ulna snapped cleanly in two. "You fired!" Ryder's voice was a low rumble, vibrating through the floorboards. It wasn't a question. It was a death sentence. "I gave no order." Gavin fell to his knees, his face grey with shock. "Alpha! She was reaching for a weapon. I was protecting the heirs." "She was reaching for my children!" Ryder snarled, shoving Gavin backward. The beta slid across the floor, crashing into the wall where the enforcers stood frozen. "Get him out of my sight. Put him in the holding cells. If he speaks, cut out his tongue." "Ryder, please!" Gavin gasped, clutching his shattered arm. "I did it for the pack. She's a stray. She's dangerous." "Take him!" Ryder roared. 2 enforcers grabbed Gavin and dragged him out into the rain. Ryder stood heaving for a moment, the claws on his hand slowly retracting, the skin knitting back together into a human hand. He took a deep, steadying breath, trying to rein in the wolf that was currently clawing at the inside of his skull, demanding he claim his mate. He turned slowly. Violet was pressed against the bookshelf, blood trickling down her temple from where the soldier had struck her earlier. She looked terrified, but her eyes, large, intelligent, and fiercely protective, didn't leave his face. Are you going to kill us too?" she whispered. Ryder felt a physical pain in his chest at her fear. He dropped to one knee, lowering his massive frame to be at eye level with her. The movement was fluid, controlled, designed to show submission. "No," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, like gravel rolling over velvet. "I am not going to hurt you. I am going to thank you." "Daddy!" Leo shouted. The boy wiggled out of Violet's grip and launched himself at his father. Ryder caught him, burying his face in the boy's neck, inhaling the scent of wood smoke and... "Violet! I thought I lost you," Ryder choked out. "Violet saved us," Mia said solemnly, staying tucked under Violet's arm. "She made the fire. She gave us the bed." Ryder looked at Violet. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features. She was wearing faded scrubs and a thick knitted cardigan. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a high-born wolf. She was human. And yet, his wolf recognized her. The scent was undeniable, a compatibility that happened once in a dozen generations. "You're injured," Ryder said, reaching out a hand toward her temple. Violet flinched away. "I'm fine, just a bump." "It's not just a bump. You have a concussion," Ryder noted, his eyes scanning her pupils. "And you're in shock." He stood up, shifting Leo to his hip. "We are leaving. This cabin is not secure. The storm is worsening, and whoever set this up, they aren't done." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Violet said, her voice trembling but firm. "You people, you just broke my door down. You have guns. You have claws." Ryder looked at the shattered door, then at the storm raging outside. "Violet," he said, using her name for the first time. It tasted like sweet wine on his tongue. "I am Ryder Kovacs. These are my children. I possess wealth and resources you cannot imagine. But right now, I am asking you, as a father, to help me. My children will not leave you. Look at them." She looked. Mia was clinging to Violet's cardigan with a death grip. Even Leo, safe in his father's arms, was reaching a hand out toward her. The bond the twins had formed with her in just a few hours was supernatural. It was an imprint. "If I leave you here," Ryder continued, "you are vulnerable. The men who took my children, they might come back to silence a witness. Please, come to my home. Let my doctors treat you. Once the storm clears and the threat is neutralized, if you wish to leave, I will personally drive you anywhere in the world." Violet looked at the rain lashing the broken doorway. She looked at the blood on the floor. She realized he was right. She was a witness to something impossible. Staying here was a death wish. "Okay," she whispered. "But I'm taking my first aid kit." Ryder allowed a rare, faint smile to touch his lips. "As you wish." He didn't let her walk. Before she could protest, he scooped her up in his free arm. She gasped, her hands instinctively clutching his shoulders. He was solid as a rock, warm and smelling of rain, cedar, and expensive leather. He carried her out of the cabin, shielding her body from the rain with his own, and walked toward the convoy of waiting SUVs. "To the estate," Ryder ordered the driver of the lead Cadillac Escalade. "Call Dr. Aris, tell him to prep the trauma wing, and tell the staff to prepare the Queen's suite." The driver's eyes widened in the rearview mirror, but he nodded. "Yes, Alpha." As the car sped away, leaving the broken cabin behind, Violet's adrenaline finally crashed. She slumped against the heated leather seat, her head lolling onto Ryder's shoulder. The twins were already asleep, piled on the seat between them. Ryder sat perfectly still, afraid that if he moved, she would wake. He watched the rain streak against the bulletproof glass, his mind racing. Gavin was a traitor. The rogues were moving, and he had just found a human mate in the middle of a war zone. He reached out, his hand hovering over her sleeping face, and gently brushed a damp strand of hair behind her ear. "I will burn the world down before I let them touch you again," he vowed silently. The Obsidian estate was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. Located on a private cliffside overlooking the Pacific, it was a sprawling masterpiece of modern architecture, glass, steel, and black stone that seemed to grow out of the mountain itself. When the convoy rolled through the iron gates, Violet woke up. She blinked, disoriented by the smooth motion of the car. The storm had broken, leaving behind a heavy fog that clung to the trees. "We are here," Ryder said softly. Violet sat up, wincing at the throb in her head. She looked out the window and gasped. This is your house." "This is the pack house," Ryder corrected. "My family lives in the East Wing. The rest is for the administration and the guard." The car stopped under a massive porte-cochere. Immediately, swarms of staff descended. They weren't normal servants. They moved with the same athletic, predatory grace as the soldiers. Ryder opened the door and stepped out, helping Violet down. Her knees buckled, and he caught her instantly, his grip firm and stabilizing. "Easy," he murmured. A woman in a sharp white suit marched down the steps. She had ice-blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that assessed Violet with the warmth of a glacier. This was Sloane, the pack's head of protocol, and, unofficially, the woman who had spent the last 5 years trying to become Ryder's Luna. "Alpha," Sloane said, bowing her head slightly. "We were relieved to hear the heirs are safe. But—" Her eyes flicked to Violet, scanning her muddy scrubs, her messy hair, and the cheap sneakers. "I wasn't aware we were taking on refugees." "This is Violet," Ryder said, his voice hardening. "She is the savior of my children. She is to be treated with the highest rank of respect. Is that clear, Sloane?" Sloane's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Crystal clear, Alpha. Dr. Orris is waiting in the medical bay." The twins, now awake and groggy, refused to go to their nursery. "Want Violet?" Mia whined, rubbing her eyes. "They stay with me," Ryder commanded. They moved through the hallways. Violet gazed in awe at the interiors, walls adorned with original art, floors of Italian marble, chandeliers that looked like cascading diamonds. It felt like she had stepped into a magazine, or a different dimension. The medical bay was state-of-the-art, rivaling the trauma center at the university hospital where Violet worked. Dr. Aris, a kind-faced man with graying temples, examined Violet quickly and efficiently. "Mild concussion," Dr. Aris concluded, shining a light in her eyes. "Bruising on the ribs, dehydration. You need rest, fluids, and no stress." He glanced at Ryder. "She's human, Alpha. She heals at a human pace. She needs time." "She will have it," Ryder said. Once Violet was settled in a private room, which looked more like a 5-star hotel suite with medical equipment subtly integrated into the walls, Ryder finally stepped out into the hallway to deal with the chaos. Sloane was waiting for him. "Ryder," she started, dropping the formal titles. "The council is gathered in the war room. They are demanding answers. Gavin's arrest has caused a ripple. His family is powerful. You can't just lock up a beta without concrete proof." "I have the proof of my own eyes," Ryder snapped, pacing the hallway. "He tried to kill the woman who saved my children." "A human woman," Sloane emphasized, stepping into his path. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch possessive. "Ryder, think about optics. You bring a human stray into the inner sanctum. You arrest your second-in-command. The Southern rogues are knocking on our door. The pack is going to see this as instability. They need a strong leader, They need a queen, not a nurse. Ryder looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. He felt nothing. No spark, no pull, just the cold calculation of politics. "I am the king," Ryder said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I don't need to perform for the council. I need to protect my pack, and right now, that woman in there has done more for my bloodline in 6 hours than you have done in 6 years." Sloane recoiled as if slapped. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Be careful, Ryder. The pack honors strength. If they think you've been compromised by a pretty face and a sob story, they will challenge you, and I might not be able to stop them." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. Ryder watched her go, a bad feeling settling in his gut. Sloane was right about one thing. The pack was a powder keg, and Gavin's family, the Blackwoods— wait, no, Blackwood is forbidden. Gavin's family, the Crestwoods, were old money. They wouldn't take his imprisonment lightly. Ryder returned to Violet's room. He needed to check on the twins. He opened the door quietly. The sight that greeted him stopped him dead in his tracks. Violet was asleep in the massive hospital bed. Leo and Mia were curled up on top of the duvet, framing her like bookends. But it wasn't just them. Sitting at the foot of the bed, watching the door with alert, glowing eyes, were 2 massive German shepherds. Ryder blinked. He didn't have German shepherds. The pack didn't keep pets. They were the canines. "Where did those come from?" Ryder asked aloud. Dr. Aris, who was checking a monitor in the corner, looked up and smiled nervously. "Ah, they followed the ambulance in, Alpha. They refused to leave the perimeter. When we opened the doors to bring Miss Violet in, they bolted past security. They haven't growled, but they won't let anyone touch the bed except me." Ryder walked slowly toward the bed. The dogs watched him. They didn't bow. They didn't cower. They assessed him. He reached out his hand. The larger dog, a male with a black saddle pattern, sniffed his palm and gave a single, short lick. Acceptance. "Protectors," Ryder whispered. He looked at Violet's sleeping face. Who was she? Humans didn't command the loyalty of beasts like this. Humans didn't make alpha heirs feel safe enough to sleep through a storm. Suddenly, the door burst open. A man in a tailored grey suit stormed in. It was Lord Harlan, the head of the council, and Gavin's uncle. He was red-faced and furious. "Is it true?" Harlan bellowed, ignoring the quiet signs. "You arrested my nephew on the word of a human strumpet?" The German shepherd stood up instantly, a low, dual growl filling the room. Ryder turned, his eyes flashing red. "Lower your voice, Harlan, or I will lower you into a grave." "This is madness!" Harlan pointed a shaking finger at Violet. "Gavin told us everything via his lawyer. He said this woman kidnapped the twins, that she drugged them. He said he tracked them to her cabin and she seduced you to cover her tracks." Ryder laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound. "Seduced me. Harlan, she knocked me out with a look, and as for kidnapping, the pack demands a trial," Harlan shouted. "A trial by truth. If she is innocent, let her stand before the moonstone. If she is lying, she dies." Violet stirred on the bed. Her eyes fluttered open, groggy and confused. She saw the angry man, the growling dogs, and Ryder's tense back. What's happening?" she whispered. Harlan sneered at her. "The witch wakes. Enjoy your luxury, girl. Tomorrow night you face the council, and when we prove you took those children, I will personally throw you to the wolves." Ryder stepped in front of Harlan, grabbing him by the lapels and lifting him off the ground. "She is under my protection. If you threaten her again, there will be no trial for you, just an execution." He threw Harlan out into the hallway and slammed the door. Ryder turned back to Violet, his expression pained. He had brought her here to be safe, but he had walked her straight into a political shark tank. "Violet," Ryder said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow, they are going to try to hurt you. They are going to use laws and magic you don't understand." Violet sat up, pushing her hair back. The fear in her eyes was fading, replaced by a steeliness he hadn't seen before. She looked at the twins, then at the dogs, and finally at him. "I didn't kidnap them," she said clearly. "I saved them. And I'm not afraid of your counsel. I deal with drunk trauma patients and arrogant surgeons every day. A few old men in suits don't scare me." Ryder stared at her. Then he grinned, a true, feral grin of admiration. "Good," he said, "because you're going to need that fire. But there is something you need to know first. Something about why the twins trust you. Why I trust you." "Why?" Violet asked. "Because," Ryder said, leaning in close, "you aren't just a nurse, Violet. You're an Omega. And whether you know it or not, you belong to this pack now." The night of the trial arrived with a heavy, suffocating stillness. The storm had passed, but the air inside the Obsidian estate felt charged with a different kind of electricity. In the Queen's suite, Violet stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror, staring at a woman she barely recognized. The dress left for her was a masterpiece of emerald silk, the color of a deep, ancient forest. It draped over her frame with a weight that felt like armor, yet the elegance of it made her feel exposed. She was a woman who lived in cotton scrubs and sensible sneakers. This silk felt like a lie. She adjusted the high neckline, her fingers trembling. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a variable in a political equation she didn't fully understand. The heavy oak door groaned on its hinges. Ryder walked in, and the room seemed to shrink around his presence. He was dressed in a formal black military-style tunic, the gold embroidery at his collar catching the dim light. He looked devastatingly regal, a king preparing for a crusade. He stopped a few feet behind her, his reflection looming over hers in the glass. For a long moment, he just watched her. "You look like you belong here," he said, his voice a low, rough velvet. Violet turned to face him, her heart thumping against her ribs. "I feel like a lamb being led to the slaughter, Ryder. This dress, this palace, it doesn't change the fact that I'm just a person who found 2 kids in the rain." Ryder stepped closer, the heat radiating from him like a furnace. He reached out, his large hand hovering near her cheek before he settled it gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this. I am the Alpha King. I can end this farce tonight. I can exile Harlan and his entire bloodline before the moon reaches its zenith." "And then what?" Violet asked, her voice gaining strength. "You'd be a tyrant. They'd say you were protecting a criminal because you were blinded by whatever it is you think I am. If I'm going to stay here, if I'm going to be part of your world, I need them to know the truth. I won't have your people whispering that their king chose a kidnapper." Ryder's eyes softened, a flicker of genuine admiration crossing his face. "The moonstone is ancient, Violet. It was pulled from the earth before our ancestors learned to walk on 2 legs. It doesn't just hear your words, it reads the frequency of your soul. If there is even a shred of deceit in you, even a white lie told to protect yourself, it will turn as black as coal. But if you are pure, it will glow like the sun." "I have nothing to hide," Violet said firmly, squaring her shoulders. "Then take my arm," he commanded, offering his elbow. They walked through the labyrinthine corridors of the estate, heading deep into the bowels of the mountain. The great hall was a cathedral of stone, a subterranean chamber carved directly into the bedrock. Hundreds of flickering torches lined the walls, casting long, dancing shadows that made the carvings on the pillars seem to move. As they entered, the low-frequency vibration of 100 growls hit Violet like a physical wall. The pack members lined the stone balconies above, their eyes glowing in the darkness, amber, gold, and steel. The air was thick with the scent of musk, wet fur, and hostility. At the far end of the hall, the council sat on a raised dais of black granite. Lord Harlan sat in the centre, his face a mask of practiced neutrality that couldn't quite hide the smugness in his eyes. Beside him stood a woman Violet hadn't seen before, a tall, skeletal figure wrapped in robes of woven silver. "The High Priestess will conduct the ceremony," Harlan announced, his voice booming through the acoustics of the cave. "The trial of truth is now in session." Ryder led Violet to the center of the room, where a jagged, milk-white monolith stood. This was the Moonstone. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, almost like a heartbeat. "Violet of the humans," the priestess intoned, her voice echoing with an eerie, hollow quality. "Step forward." Violet walked toward the stone. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. She felt Ryder's presence behind her, a steady, unwavering anchor in a sea of monsters. "Place your hands upon the Moonstone," the priestess ordered. "And answer. Did you lure the heirs of the Shadow Pine Pack to your cabin with intent to harm, or to hold them for ransom against their father?" Violet reached out. The stone was ice-cold, the texture like frozen silk. She closed her eyes, thinking of the 2 shivering children on her porch. "No," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "I found them shivering in the rain. I took them in to save their lives because they were small and cold and alone." The stone remained white. A collective murmur rippled through the balconies like wind through grass. "Did you conspire with the Southern Rogues, or the Beta Gavin to facilitate the disappearance of the children from the Obsidian Estate?" "I don't even know who the Southern Rogues are," Violet replied, her eyes snapping open to meet the priestess's gaze. "And I only met Gavin when he kicked down my door and tried to shoot me in my own living room." The stone began to hum. A faint, pearlescent glow began to radiate from its center, illuminating Violet's face. Harlan stood up, his face twisting into a sneer. He couldn't let it end this way. The stone measures intent, not influence. Ask her about the bond. Ask her if she used witchcraft or pheromones to ensnare the Alpha's wolf. No human woman attracts an Alpha King this quickly without foul play. The priestess narrowed her eyes, looking between Ryder and Violet. "Violet, do you possess any knowledge of the supernatural bond that ties you to Ryder Kovacs? Have you sought to manipulate him through means outside the natural order?" Violet looked back at Ryder. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. In that moment, she didn't see a king or a monster. She saw a man who had been as lonely as she was. "I don't know anything about bonds or magic," Violet said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "I only know that when I look at him, I feel like I've finally found my way home. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty." The Moonstone didn't just glow, it erupted. A blinding golden light exploded from the monolith, a pillar of radiance that shot toward the ceiling of the cave. It was so bright that the council members cried out, shielding their eyes. The light was warm, ancient, and undeniable. It wasn't just a confirmation of truth, it was a coronation. The stone recognized her not as a prisoner, nor as a human stray, but as the true Luna, the missing half of the pack's soul. The growling in the balconies stopped instantly. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the crackle of the torches. One by one, the wolves above began to drop to their knees, bowing their heads in submission to the light. But the peace was shattered by a scream of pure, unhinged rage. "Liar!" Gavin appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his arm in a bloody sling, his face a mask of sweat and madness. Behind him, a dozen armed men in tactical gear, mercenaries from the southern rogues, burst through the side entrances. "If I can't have the pack, no one will!" Gavin screamed, holding a black detonator high in his good hand. "I've rigged the support pillars of this hall. We all go down together." The golden light of the moonstone flickered as the first gas canister hissed onto the floor. The trial was over. The war had begun. The air in the subterranean hall had turned into a toxic soup. The sweet, cloying scent of wolfsbane gas, a concentrated neurotoxin designed to paralyze the lupine nervous system, swirled in thick, grey ribbons. It was a coward's weapon, intended to strip the world's most powerful predators of their strength, and for a moment, it worked. All around the chamber, the elite enforcers of the Shadowpine Pack crumbled to their knees, clutching their throats as their inner wolves howled in agony. In the center of the chaos, Gavin stood like a vengeful ghost. His face was a mask of twitching hysteria. "I gave you everything, Ryder," he screamed, his voice cracking under the weight of his psychosis. "I was your shadow, your blade, and you cast me aside for a human stray." Ryder didn't answer with words. He couldn't. His body was a battlefield. The gas was trying to shut down his lungs, but the Alpha King's blood was different. It was ancient, thick with a primal resilience that refused to yield. He shifted mid-air, a violent, bone-snapping transformation that sent a spray of gravel flying. Clothes tore away as his massive grey form took shape, a beast the size of a grizzly bear with eyes like molten silver. Even partially paralyzed by the gas, Ryder pounced. He was a blur of silver-grey fur and lethal intent. He slammed into the first mercenary, the sound of the impact echoing like a car crash. "Violet, get the twins!" The voice didn't come from his throat. It exploded inside Violet's mind. It was a telepathic link, a tether forged by the moonstone's light. It was hot, desperate, and fiercely protective. Violet didn't freeze. She was a trauma nurse. She was trained to find order in the center of a bloodbath. While the highborn wolves were gasping for air, Violet's human lungs, though burning, were still functional. She pivoted, her eyes scanning the dais. "Leo! Mia!" she screamed. She found them in the small stone alcove behind the High Priestess's throne. They were huddled together, their small bodies trembling. Leo had his arms wrapped around his sister, his tiny teeth bared in a futile snarl at the smoke. "I've got you," Violet gasped, sliding on the marble as she reached them. She scooped them into her arms, the sheer weight of them nearly toppling her. "We have to move. Now!" She turned to flee toward the service exit, but the path was blocked. Sloane stood there, the ice-blonde hair now disheveled, her eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight with a murderous glint. She wasn't shifting. She was holding a silver dagger, the blade etched with runes designed to prevent wolf healing. "You've ruined a century of planning," Sloane hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I was groomed for this. I studied the rites, the lineages, the politics. I was supposed to be the Queen of the North. And he looks at you, a girl who smells like cheap soap and medicine, like you're a goddess." "He doesn't look at me because of a lineage, Sloane," Violet said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She tucked the twins behind her legs, shielding them with her body. "He looks at me because I actually care if his children live or die. You just wanted a throne." Sloane lunged, the silver blade whistling through the air. Violet felt a surge of something cold and electric ignite in her chest, the Omega spark. It wasn't physical strength. It was a heightened perception. The world seemed to slow down. She saw the trajectory of the blade, the slight tremor in Sloane's wrist. Violet ducked, the silver tip missing her throat by a fraction of an inch. As Sloane overextended, Violet swung her heavy medical bag with every ounce of strength she possessed. The bag, weighted with a portable defibrillator and stainless steel kits, connected with Sloane's face with a sickening crunch. The would-be queen collapsed into a heap of silk and broken pride, her nose shattered. Meanwhile, Gavin had reached the center of the hall, standing atop the jagged remains of the Moonstone's pedestal. He held the detonator high, his thumb hovering over the red button. "If I can't have the pack, no one will. I'll bury us all in this mountain." But Gavin had forgotten about the strays. Out of the shadows, the two German shepherds, the dogs that had followed Violet from the woods, launched themselves with terrifying synchronicity. They didn't bark, they were silent hunters. The larger male leapt, his jaws locking onto Gavin's broken arm with a vice-like grip. The second dog took him at the knees. Gavin screamed as he was brought down. The detonator clattered across the stone floor, sliding toward a crack in the bedrock. Ryder was there in a heartbeat. He had reverted to his human form, though he was still half changed. Fur receded from his jaw, and his claws were still extended 4 inches long. He looked like a demon from a fever dream as he loomed over Gavin. "Ryder, please, we're brothers," Gavin wheezed, his blood staining the white marble. Ryder reached down and gripped Gavin by the throat, hoisting his former beta off the ground until Gavin's feet dangled uselessly. The Alpha King's face was inches from the traitors. "Brothers don't leave children in a storm," Ryder growled, his voice a vibration that felt like it could shatter glass. "Brothers don't fire on their own mate. There is no mercy for those who touch my blood." With a sharp, brutal twist of his wrists, the sound of snapping bone ended Gavin's treachery forever. Ryder tossed the body aside like a piece of refuse. The silence that followed was heavy. The mercenaries, seeing their benefactor dead, and the Alpha King standing amidst the clearing gas like a god of vengeance, dropped their weapons. They were professionals. They knew when the contract was dead. Ryder turned, his eyes wild and bloodshot, searching the room. "Violet?" She emerged from behind the dais, the twins clutched to her sides. She was a mess. Her emerald dress was shredded at the hem, her face was streaked with soot and Sloane's blood, and her hair was a wild nest. But she was standing tall, her eyes never leaving his. Ryder crossed the hall in 3 massive strides. He didn't care about the council. He didn't care about the kneeling wolves or the dead traitors. He wrapped his arms around all 3 of them, pulling them into a crushing, desperate embrace. He buried his face in the crook of Violet's neck, inhaling her scent, lavender, antiseptic, and life. "You stayed," he whispered, his body shaking with the force of his relief. "You didn't run." "I told you," Violet murmured, leaning her head against his massive chest. "I'm a nurse. We don't leave when things get messy." Leo and Maya clung to Ryder's legs, their small whimpers turning into sighs of safety. Lord Harlan, the last of the dissenting council members, stepped forward. He looked at the dead Beta, the broken Sloane, and then at the woman who had protected the heirs without a single claw or fang. He realized then that strength wasn't always measured in muscle. It was measured in what one was willing to die for. Harlan dropped to his knees, bowing his head to the floorboards. The council was blind. We saw a human. The stone saw a queen. We acknowledge the true lunar of the shadow pine. One by one, the hundreds of wolves in the gallery followed suit. A sea of warriors, hunters, and elders knelt in absolute silence, honoring the woman who had saved their future. Violet looked up at Ryder, a small, tired smile playing on her lips. "Does this mean I don't get to go back to my cabin? I really liked that porch." Ryder pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. his silver gaze now warm and filled with an almost terrifying devotion. "You can have 10 cabins, Violet, but they'll all have to be on my land, because the pack came for blood, but they found a heart, and I am never letting it go." As the first rays of dawn pierced through the high, clear story windows, the Obsidian estate was no longer a fortress of fear. It was a home, and the Alpha King, for the first time in his life, finally relented to the peace he had found in the arms of an Omega. And that is how the fiercest Alpha King in history was tamed, not by a warrior's blade, but by the quiet strength of a woman who chose kindness in the middle of a storm. Violet and Ryder's story is a reminder that sometimes the greatest power isn't in the hunt, it's in the protection of those we love. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of the Shadow Pine Pack, make sure to hit that like button and comment below with your favorite moment. Was it the standoff at the cabin, or the revelation at the Moonstone? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story of Rydersy, betrayal, and supernatural destiny. We have many more legends to share, and you won't want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and stay wild.